All right, everyone. Hello and welcome to something a little bit new with, I was going to say an old guy. That's a bit hard. A guy I've known for a long time. We've known each other about 10 years, John, which I was thinking earlier, which is
Yeah.
crazy stuff. But this is the first Celtic Way weekly, episode number 1. Something new. We're trying a little bit of discussion on Celtic, a weekly show for you, just away from the kind of daily stuff that the both of us usually do. So something a little bit different. Anyway, John, this is you're the brains behind this, obviously. So tell everyone what this is.
Yeah, it's really just what you say. Like we both, you do a daily show on your channel, Celtic AM. I kind of do, I do the daily show on the Celtic Way channel, which we're on currently. And what we talk about in the shows is really reaction to the day's news or the previous day's news or things that are happening in the moment. I think with this show and this format that we're going to kind of try and progress over the next wee while, the idea is to just basically have a blether about Celtic, some big picture stuff, some in-depth stuff, some guests from time to time, a little bit more flexible, a little bit more structured, just a lot of Celtic chat. Now, as Hamish alluded to there, myself and Hamish have actually been podcasting together since 2016, which is a bit crazy. It's coming up for 9 years, I think, since we started. I think we started in 2016. I think it was Brendan Rodgers' first season, and that was when our
Do you
first
remember what
podcast
game it
started.
was? Do you remember
I
the
do
game?
not, Hamish. I don't
No,
know
it
that.
was
Do you?
it was our 100th trophy. It was the game we beat Aberdeen to win Brendan Rodgers first as Celtic manager, and we did
Okay.
a podcast after that. So it's a long time.
Yeah. And that was called the Grand Old Podcast, if anyone remembers that. It was just an audio only thing, it wasn't on YouTube. And then, of course, Hamish found great fame and infamy as the host of the 67 Hail Hail channel, which I was also a part of, and we developed that for a wee while. Very much Hamish taking the lead on that and growing it into what it is. But we spoke regularly on that as well, which is probably where most people watching this know us from. And we're still kind of chatting to each other about Celtic regularly, and wherever we are on Celtic AM or the Celtic Way, we're chatting about Celtic. So this is the way for that to continue. As I say, it's a weekly show. Sometimes weekly shows, Hamish, they're a bit easier to keep up with than checking something out every day. It'll be, yeah, as I say, big picture stuff, lots of topics, lots of different kinds of topics, and we want to push and progress with it and make it a good thing that people like to tune it into every week. So that's my little spiel over. But yeah, I'm excited to talk about Celtic as always, Hamish. As I always am. I could talk about Celtic for hours.
And you do, and I do.
I
So
do.
it's a good mix. So this is obviously going out on YouTube. Hello, if you're watching on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
It's also going out as a podcast as well, so people
Mm-hmm.
can listen. And I think this week's is going out a little bit later, just due to the Champions League draw, which we'll discuss. But when normally is this going to drop?
We're going to be aiming to drop this on like a Monday afternoon, late afternoon, 4 or 5 o'clock. Very much your old time slot on YouTube, Hamish. I know you do mornings now, but you used to do an evening type
Yeah.
show. And that's the slot we're going to try and push this into on a Monday. This is coming out on a Tuesday. And as I say, I'll put all the links to all the feeds, all the audio feeds in the description below. I don't have them to hand at the moment, but we will sort this out as we go.
Yeah, it's a work in progress, but hopefully you're with us and along for the ride. So yeah, thanks very much for being here. So what have we got on today, John? There's a few different things you want to talk about.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are talking about Idah, Hamish and Yang. A lot of people talking about Brendan Rodgers' comments about transfers, and obviously the reaction to the Champions League draw as well. So we've got a full show of different topics leading into each other. They all kind of revolve around each other. To be quite honest, Hamish. I think we'll get into some of the discussion around Idah and Yang to begin with, just because that is the most recent game against St Mirren, the 1-0 win. Now, for me, Hamish, I feel like Idah and Yang have found themselves caught in this furore about Celtic transfers. And I think the reason there's so much discussion around this pair is not just because of their performances, but because of what it means for the wider Celtic squad depth, squad strength, and very much getting judged with those eyes. And there's a lot more intense discussion around them. And some of it's very fair, I feel like, obviously, and some of it is a little bit over the top just because of the nature of where Celtic sit in the summer. I don't know how you feel about this, but because I've not actually talked to you about this, but what I want to get into is just where Idah and Yang are and what it does mean for Celtic's attack at the moment. Because I think St Mirren, anyone who watched the St Mirren game would recognise that there was problems with both in that Celtic attack, and there are pretty serious issues in terms of, if you're thinking about Celtic playing Slovan Bratislava or Kairat in the Champions League, stepping up to that level, even that level, never mind league phase, seems like quite a big ask for Yang in particular, and perhaps even Idah.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the issues that I'll probably mention, I've got it further down in what I was going to mention, but one of the kind of issues I've got at the moment with Celtic and following Celtic is, and this probably isn't just confined to Celtic, it's probably general life these days, but everything is all or nothing. Someone's either incredible or they're horrendous, and the reality with virtually everything is that it's somewhere in the middle. And I think the reality with both Yang and Idah is that they both have strong points. They've both shown us stuff last season that they can score. They can both score goals. Idah scored 20 last year. Yang, I think, scored 6 or 7 in the second half of the season. So there's hopes that, Yang could maybe grab 12 goals, something like that, more than that this season. So they both have strong points. They've both produced, decent moments for us last season. But also, neither of them are or should be starters for Celtic at the moment. And the fact is that they both are. We had our opening game on Sunday, and both were in the starting lineup. And as much as that's not their fault, as you say, you're then viewing it as the attack and it being a real downgrade from what we had this time last season, when it was that excellent Kun, Maida, Kyogo front three that we're so excited about. So as much as everything gets made out as Yang's abysmal, there's nothing to work with there, and he does the biggest waste of money ever in Celtic history, I think they both do have positive points. I want both of them to stick around. I don't want to sell either of them, but I think they're both shown that they're impact players, and they've both done pretty well off the bench, I would say, but really both struggled to be starters so far, and that's an issue we've seen with a number of players in recent years.
So there's a lot of talk about, in specific to Sunday, there's a lot of talk about Idah's chance where he hits the post, and I was screaming from the rooftops as much as anyone is, in that's a chance he needs to bury and stick home, especially in this context of proving himself as a starting Celtic centre forward. So I'm just going to throw this up, and this is kind of like Idah's shot map on the day of 4 shots, and his kind of XG around that chance in the 71st minute where he hits the post.
So this is the one at the back post, everyone. He chests it and he volleys it off the post.
Yeah. And so I thought that was a much higher value chance than StatsBomb's given it credit for. StatsBomb seem to think it's of a range of 0.19 XG, which is quite a low value chance. It's not one that's obviously impossible to score, but it's maybe not the sitter that everyone's banging on about and saying that Idah definitely should have hit the back of the net with this. And to be honest, I even said it on social media, on Twitter, like I was disappointed that he didn't convert that chance. His XG on the day was 0.56, indicating that it's maybe not a day from a finishing standpoint that Idah would have been expected to score. I think Idah's finishing in general is quite solid. I don't know how you feel about this, just in terms of last year and the way that he converts chances. That's not really the issue with Idah for me. And as you say, he's a great impact player. If we're up this is his goals from last year. So this is every goal he scored and the type of goal he scored, from a through ball. I think there was a one header there, and then most of them are quite close to the goal, in the middle of the goal. The red indicates a higher XG chance, and the blue that gets indicates a lower XG chance. Now, this is Scottish Premiership only, so he scored 13 goals in the Scottish Premiership last year, and his expected goals was around just over the 12 goal mark if you include the penalty that he scored. So, again, that indicates that he's finishing chances at about the rate you would expect for the chances that were offered to him. So, for me, when we're discussing Idah, I don't think we're really worried about his finishing, and I think that's important to note. It's really about his all-round game for me, Hamish, that seems to be the sticking point with Idah. And it was apparent again against St Mirren. there's concerns for me about the way Idah holds up the ball, the way he brings other players into the game. His first touch is a struggle. I'm not sure if that's a confidence thing or what's going on with him, but I have to say, as a starting player for Celtic right now, I'm actually quite worried about him. He's got a lot of defenders, and I appreciate that, but he needs to be doing more in a Celtic shirt to convince, I think, both Brendan Rodgers, but also the Celtic support. I just think he's running out of runway and taking off as a Celtic centre forward.
It's just such a hard one to weigh up because you brought up stats there, and I mean the most simplistic stat I guess you would look at would be his goal scoring from last season, and
Yeah.
it was pretty impressive, I would say, for the minutes he got. I think I need to look into this, but I think fairly similar to Dies and Maida in terms of the minutes per goal, fairly similar to Kyogo. It's maybe like a goal every 100 minutes, something like that, which is kind of fairly typical for a Celtic striker who's perceived to be doing well. But then you just can't help kind of with what you're actually watching on the pitch, and it just doesn't quite feel like the perfect fit. And that chance on Saturday, yeah, I was struggling. I'm glad you brought it up because I was kind of struggling to work out whether it was a chance he should be burying or if he kind of did as well as he could. I mean, he didn't blaze it over the bar; he smacked the post, so he was really close. And if he'd have scored, he'd have been a hero, and we're viewing him as a match winner and probably having a slightly different conversation about him. So it's those fine margins, but I'm just looking at it and thinking, a top Celtic striker in those moments takes that chance and tucks it away. So I take your point about the chances. It's actually, I guess he misses chances, but I guess virtually every striker misses chances. Like Kyogo missed a lot of chances, but it just felt like you could rely on Kyogo a bit more in those clutch moments. On the point of build-up play, yeah, that's a concern. I thought when we played Ajax in pre-season and they had the forward, I actually can't remember his name. Was it Brian Brobby, I think his name was, and the way he was able to kind of back in and link the play for Ajax, I thought was quite an interesting kind of insight into what a top level striker can bring you, and he does just not of that level. So he's a strange one, to be honest. I'm kind of, part of me's thinking if you put faith in Adam Idah as the number one striker, does he repay you? Because he's tended, you look at last season when he got runs in the team, he tended to pick up a bit and go on really good scoring runs. It was the times when he was playing second fiddle to Kyogo or Dyson that he wasn't really able to get any momentum. So part of me's thinking, give him a run and maybe he just explodes. He's a young striker. He's kind of got all the attributes you need in terms of pace and power and all of that. But I don't think we can go with Adam Idah being the main striker. I mean, the club, Brendan Rodgers wants another striker, doesn't he? He's been kind of, as much as he hasn't outright said that, I think it's pretty clear. But, I've got my doubts over whether we will get that, especially if someone like Shin starts really well.
What did you make of Johnny Kenny coming on for Shin Yamada, which is obviously something a lot of people are talking about too? It seemed odd to me, I have to say. Like, I'm not one to read too much into things because you don't know the exact situations of players around training and what their situation is. I was surprised nobody in the press room asked Brendan Rodgers about Shin Yamada after the game. It seemed an obvious question to ask. It was a bit strange for me, Hamish, I have to be honest with you. Like, I just think...
You can get it, though. Like, you can get it to an extent, and that, Brendan Rodgers is obviously... I think he really rates Johnny Kenny. I do. I think he likes Johnny Kenny, and I guess from one point of view, if you're looking at it the other way, you would view Shin's just in the door, and Kenny's had a proper pre-season and has done pretty well in pre-season. And if he doesn't put Kenny on, then what message does that send out to Kenny, who I think's doing all the right things? But I do totally agree with you. And at the time, it's fine because we won the game, but at the time at 0-0 when he makes that sub, I was pretty frustrated, to be honest, because we've got Shin Yamada there, who we don't know a hell of a lot about, but to me, in the 45 minutes we saw him against Al Ahly, looked to offer more than Kenny has or more than Idah has in the whole of pre-season. But you've got this concern. Brendan Rodgers kind of has a history with players. If he doesn't appear to fancy them early on, and it's maybe perceived as being a club signing, which is this new buzzword, then sometimes these players just never get a look at. I mean, I've thinking of like Marian Shved and Marco Tilio, and there's a few other examples. And you can chat about Yamada, but also Inamura didn't even make the bench on Sunday, which I thought was quite telling as well.
I said to you a couple of weeks ago, I think I said, I don't mind the Shin Yamada signing. I quite like it from a certain perspective, as long as Brendan Rodgers is enthused by it. Because this player's, he's not a kid. You know, he's not someone who is in those kind of peak years of developing further. He's been around the J League for a couple of years. I know Japanese players develop later because of the university system and all that. But it just felt like he had the profile of a first team signing. It doesn't feel like he fits the profile of a development signing. And so the fact that Brendan Rodgers doesn't seem particularly enthused by him at the moment worries me a little bit in the context of everything we're talking about this summer and Rodgers and how the recruitment's functioning. So I was a little bit, it did raise my eyebrows on Sunday to not see Yamada come on. I don't want to make too much of it. I know a lot of people are, but it's just one of those things that where people are now watching. They're now watching how Brendan Rodgers is using Shin Yamada. And I don't think it necessarily had to be like that. But I guess Rodgers picks the team, of course, and there may be issues with Yamada in training and adjusting to the tempo of the game. And it was a point in the game where we had to find a winner, so maybe he just doesn't want to throw him into that environment. That's fair enough as well.
Yeah. It seems a bit messy, to be honest. Just on the Inamura point, did you see the comments from Brendan Rodgers on Friday when he was asked about, do you view Inamura as the backup to Kieran Tierney? And it was hardly a ringing endorsement. I mean, he talked up what Inamura has brought, and again played up the fact that Inamura was basically meant to come in and go straight out on loan, and Inamura surprised him. But I took it from that I think Brendan Rodgers is still in the market for another left back. I've still got question marks over Inamura's actual position. It seems strange to me you would sign a player who's been playing centre back and play him left back the whole of pre-season. Just bizarre.
I think it tells us that Brendan Rodgers sees pre-season in the same way a lot of the people do, as a purely fitness exercise of fairly low intensity matches. And it was really apparent to me, just the intensity of the way St Mirren played and the resilience and the determination was obviously at a level above what we saw in pre-season, despite the quality of opposition being greater. And I think you saw even in Benjamin Nigren's performance, just his adaptation to the speed of Scottish football. And Rodgers is maybe looking at Inamura and thinking, maybe this guy isn't quite ready for this environment, which I think is fair enough, to be honest. I haven't minded what I've seen of Inamura over pre-season, but I would certainly feel okay about Brendan Rodgers going back into the market for a backup left back for Tierney.
But again, like the whole thing, Inamura's done pretty well when he's come in, but it's like I just feel like there's been such a kind of a need or a want to talk Inamura up to the point that he's like, outstanding, and he's been relatively good. I think he's been impressive so far. But if I'm totally honest, like, I mean, if he even is a left back, do I feel totally comfortable so far in saying that he could be a deputy to Kieran Tierney? I don't, because I've not seen enough of him. And we even saw at the weekend there, Tierney goes off with cramp. Like that second choice left back is going to get a hell of a lot of game time this season. I think it's going to be fairly even. It might be 60-40 Tierney, someone else. But yeah, I just thought there was a few interesting things on Sunday. You mentioned Nigren. Obviously nothing to be worried about. We saw enough in pre-season, but what do you think? Do you just get a bit nervous or something on Sunday?
I think it's purely an adaptation thing of like the physicality and the quickness of Scottish Premiership football. And he had a lot of time. There was a lot of space on the ball, on and off the ball in pre-season, and obviously he shines in that environment because he's got technical ability, he's got a bit of vision. I thought he was actually decent enough in the first half. Like, not in the early stages. I thought he grew into the first half, and then by the end of it was pushing more, getting himself into the box more. Obviously, he has that chance that Shamal George tips onto the bar. And if he scores that, it's a totally different story. It didn't quite connect for him, as you say though. Like nothing, I'm not worried about him because you clearly see the ability he has. Like he has that technical ability. There was a moment where he kind of shielded the ball and fended off one of the opposition midfielders, and you're thinking if he starts doing that regularly, then and gets that confidence, like you're saying, then I think he's really going to come onto a game. I've still got good feelings about Nikan.
Just briefly on Aberdeen on Saturday, so that's a challenging game going away from home. Kind of same team, or I mean, I'm trying to think who could potentially come in.
I'm going to come on to this because I don't think Yang should start at Pittodrie. In fact, I would be quite worried about it if he did, because Yang played for an hour against St Mirren and was, just for me, completely anonymous. Just had a really...
Pittodrie last time, John. I need to point that out. End of the season, he was good.
I thought you had a really poor game at the weekend, and I thought Forrest did as much, or if not more than him, in the half an hour he was on the pitch compared to Yang's 60 minutes. Now, I've got a wee graphic here on Yang's. This is pass map, so this is passes. The red arrows are completed passes. The orange/yellow arrows are incomplete passes. Yang's on the left here, and you can see his passing is just not direct enough for a winger at Celtic. A lot of it backwards, a lot of it sideways and backwards in that kind of horseshoe. And then I guess, St Mirren are very much sat in deep here, but Yang needs to be more direct and more impactful, or at least I'd be attempting to. Now you can see James Forrest on the right here, Hamish, and you can see he's less successful pass completion rate with those orange and yellow arrows, but you can see the direction of play. He's constantly trying to get into that box and make something happen. And James Forrest was a catalyst for Celtic on Sunday, Hamish, for me.
Yeah. The other thing, just looking at that, all of Yang's kind of passes appear to kind of originate in the same point, which is like the old-fashioned right winger bit, whereas Jamesy's kind of popping up everywhere, which I guess shows the kind of impact he had on things.
He was buzzing about. He was also obviously a little bit further forward at that point. Again, the game's a little bit more ragged here. Celtic are pushing for a goal, so that is a factor here. But Yang's just far too safe in this possession here. He's just far too safe. And I felt he played within himself, and I don't think he had any sort of impact on the game at all. And I'm looking at the game now, and I'm thinking, yes, there might be question marks about Forrest's ability to complete an entire 90 minutes. And again, Forrest may be one of those players at this stage of his career who is a better impact player, like Yang is. But that right wing position, if we're talking about Pittodrie, if we're talking about the challenges ahead, Ibrox, Europe, like it's just such a priority that it can no longer be ignored.
So we've got a couple of right wingers who are potentially really effective off the bench, because I think Yang has been, to be fair. Yeah. But we need a starting right winger. That's a major revelation, everyone. We need a starting right winger.
Yeah, I'm glad we solved something on the first episode of the Celtic Way Weekly. We're talking about things that no one talks about.
Did you want to talk about on that topic, Brendan Rodgers' kind of comments? I know we briefly maybe mentioned them there, but
yeah, I mean, I think again, very emotive in the reaction to that when people see what he said and hear what he said and read what he said and projecting all sorts of stuff onto it. I think it's important to figure out, for me anyway, from my opinion, I thought what he said was very reasonable, like in the sense of, this is my ambition as a manager, this is my ambition for Celtic. Celtic can take it or leave it. Now, he was asked, is he making a demand of the board? I don't think it's like that. It's not Rodgers saying, back me or I'm away. It's Rodgers saying, this is what I'm about. You have the choice whether you want to invest more in a future of Celtic with me at the helm or not. And it's pretty clear what the terms are on that. And I think he's very reasonable. And I thought he actually spoke very well, Hamish. And I think it's difficult for Brendan Rodgers. And it's difficult because he's the only senior figure at Celtic who says anything. The silence and the communication from Celtic is abysmal, and there's no senior figures talking, not even on a rare basis. They're not talking at all. You get a few sign bites at the AGM. You see their names in statements released by PR from time to time. I can't remember the last time I heard from Michael Nicholson in any meaningful way.
I think I've ever heard him speak. No. Genuinely, I don't know what he sounds like. And
we know that Brendan Rodgers is a cog in this recruitment machine at Celtic, but he's not he might not even be the most important one. And nobody's communicating any sort of semblance of strategy or plan. And the reason there's so much unrest at Celtic every single summer is because this vacuum of information, this void of information, just gets filled with rumour and speculation and posts off message boards and Twitter and social media. Now, that would exist anyway. I'm not saying Celtic can control or completely eradicate that, but they can at least try to control the message around the club, and they just don't seem interested in doing it, which is their right. And so I think what Brendan Rodgers sees, I think he sees all this rumour and speculation. I think he knows that it's damaging, and I think he's trying to get out ahead of it and just put his thoughts out there so that he doesn't need to be consistently asked about this contract situation, about this transfer situation. He said at the weekend around the St Mirren game, before or after it, he said, I'm sick of talking about transfers, because he said everything he needs to say. What more can he say? So I actually took it as like a positive step from Brendan Rodgers in the sense of he's just putting himself out there. He's making everyone clear what the situation is. I don't think there's any hidden messages. There's no mixed meanings here. We know where Brendan Rodgers stands. What we don't know is where the club stand, and I think that's a real problem. It's a real problem.
Yeah, it's. I mean, they've had a number of opportunities recently with various kind of appear to be the kind of new roles that have come up in terms of the Paul Tisdale stuff, and that was an opportunity for me to again take the fans on some sort of journey with that. We're not asking to know everything, but put Paul Tisdale out, let's hear from him. The Sean Maloney stuff recently, again, yeah. Sean Maloney's just another one who's probably going to go into the club and do really good stuff, but we're not going to hear from Sean Maloney ever.
And that's the thing, Hamish. I'm actually hearing good noises around the Sean Maloney stuff at the moment, and the fact that he seems very engaged with the role, and he's engaged with the partner clubs and the players going out on loan. There's a good story to be told there, and I'm not saying they need to open the doors to all outside media and just let everyone have free rein. They have their own YouTube channel, they have their own social media outlets. They can control what message they want going out. They just don't send any out.
And yeah, this is nothing new, obviously, to us supporting Celtic, but other clubs do this. Not every other club, but you have Tony Bloom at Hearts the other night. I think they had some sort of in-house event there where he spoke to fans. And people may say, that's a bit different. He's a kind of out-of-the-box type thinker. Hearts are a smaller club, so it's maybe he's maybe more accessible. But again, that's the kind of thing we would love, to maybe have some sort of thing with Paul Tisdale, or an in-house interview, or with Sean Maloney. And yeah, even Rangers post a lot more stuff on their YouTube channel, sit downs with various people they've got in charge at the club. So yeah, I do find that frustrating, but I would be able to deal with it a lot more not hearing about the plan if I felt there was a proper plan in place. And I have concerns that there is a proper plan in place. It just, looking from the outside, and again, as you say, rumour, speculation, etc., fills the void. But it does appear a lot of the time like Celtic are kind of running about in the transfer market, not really knowing what to do.
And I think there's a misconception that Celtic are briefing certain newspapers or certain outlets. They're not. The silence from Celtic runs deep. It's not just this kind of lack of public communication. They're just not out there controlling any messaging at all in the media, behind the scenes, or anything really. It's just complete absence of information from the Celtic end, which is fine if that's how they want to handle it. I'm not saying the media is a particularly welcome place for Celtic at times. There is traditionally been hostility there, and I get it, but I just feel they could be more proactive in kind of informing supporters some way, either through off-the-record briefings to newspapers or outlets, or in this more public PR way through their own media channels. And I think that's the whole thing around the noise around transfers, the noise around everything at the club, is that you just don't hear much from them. Like, what's going on with Barrowfield?
Yeah.
There's rumblings that it could be just like a kind of council red tape thing. But what's the situation with that? Where's the update on that? And just stuff like that, Hamish, just everything really. It's one of those things that bugs me. And so when Brendan Rodgers is out there talking about transfers as the only one, there's nothing, there's no sign of where the club stand on any of this. And I think that is quite frustrating for supporters who underpin the entire business model of the club with merchandising, ticket sales, etc. Like, that's the reason why Tony Bloom's out there as well, because the Hearts fans are so important. to the functioning of that club. And Celtic's the same, to be frank with you. It's not a club that is reliant on TV income or gets automatic income from anywhere. You know, it's a club that needs to be engaged with its customer base, if you want to put it like that, on a day-to-day basis. And I just don't think that engagement is there at all. And it seems more and more like a strategy, and I'm confused by it.
I just think there's a kind of risk-averse strategy throughout the club, and kind of virtually everything they do, apart from asking for money for kits. There's no kind of risk-averse strategy when it comes to Adidas stuff or season tickets or whatever. Anyway, enough of that. Of that. We can talk about Champions League if you want. The draw was made yesterday, so we've drawn either Slovan Bratislava or Kairat, whoever comes through that tie. I think fair to say it's more likely to be Slovan. I think it's a bit closer maybe than people would think. I reckon maybe 60-40. I'm enjoying that 60-40 to the 60-40 in favour of Slovan. Kairat are top of the Kazakh league at the moment. They're 3 points ahead of Astana. They've so far in the Champions League beaten the Slovenian champions Olympic Ljubljana 3-1 in aggregate, and they then beat the Finnish champions Kups 3-2. They've won both their home legs 2-0 and 3-0, so pretty strong at home as you would expect. Maybe not so much away from home. Slovan Bratislava entered in the last round, so they beat the Bosnian champions Zrinjski Mostar 6-2 in aggregate, and that was a 4-0 win at home. So both teams pretty strong at home, which I guess you kind of expect from any champions, don't you? But we've got the first leg at home. Just briefly, if people are wondering, first leg of the tie that's coming up between Kairat and Slovan is in Almaty Wednesday evening, 4 p.m. Celtic Park time. It's a bit of an earlier kick-off. Second leg next Tuesday, 7:15 Celtic Park time in Bratislava. And UEFA also have the apparent dates and times up for our tie. So the home leg at Celtic Park, first leg, Wednesday the 20th of August, that'll be 8 p.m. And the away leg, Tuesday the 26th of August. And I'm guessing kick-off time will depend on who we're playing. If we're playing in Kazakhstan, it'll be one of those kind of 4 or 5 p.m. kickoffs. If it's Bratislava, it'll be 8 p.m. But yeah, the Tuesday night for the away leg, so an extra day to prepare for Ibrox.
Yeah. Interesting tie. I don't fancy the Kazakhstan trip, I have to be honest. And Slovan Bratislava might be the more accomplished outfit. Obviously, they made the league phase last year. But I never feel good about making those mammoth trips at this stage of the season, where everything's still a bit in flux as well. Now, I'm sure you know about this Hamish, but for the listeners and viewers, there's some sort of SPFL rule, isn't there, that Celtic have the right to postpone the Livingston game in between the two legs, between the first and the second leg. And obviously, because the second leg could be in Kazakhstan, I'm not sure if that's something the club would entertain. I think Brendan Rodgers was asked about it when the rule first came up. Yeah. And I think he indicated that he wasn't that interested in doing that. But that's before there's a potential trip to Kazakhstan. So I'm not sure if that's something the club might explore. I mean, it could be worth it, you know, if you're making that big mammoth trip and then you know you've got this Rangers game around the corner. It might make sense to not have a game that weekend and just play it later in the season. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I'd say probably. And there's two arguments. It's always that old argument of, are you better having a rest before a big game, or are you better, you know, staying sharp and having a match? And to be honest, the evidence over the years is kind of not favoured either, really. But my hunch would be, you probably do kind of postpone that Livingston game, and especially we've got kind of a few players with various knocks and maybe a little bit fragile at the moment, kind of thinking Cameron Carter-Vickers and Alistair Johnson. So yeah, potentially, but equally, I wouldn't be totally surprised if Celtic view it as just, you know, let's get on with it. To be honest, yeah, my hunch would be they might ask for it to be postponed, but there must be some sort of cut-off as well. And
yeah,
I think
that's what I was
Hibs
thinking.
Hibs have already called off their game, I'm sure I read. So I don't know if there's any chance we might have missed the cut-off, or if the cut-off is just coming up, or what the story's going to be.
So how are you feeling about it? Are you feeling confident, whichever team it is, that, I mean, this is a tie that Celtic should be winning over two legs?
Definitely, yeah. I think Slovan Bratislava will be a tougher tie.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I don't think folk are doing this, but people looking at last season's game and I know you've got
Mm-hmm.
some stuff in that as well, and the 5-1 game, that was obviously just a one-off at Celtic Park effectively. I think it's very, very different with a two-legged tie. At the moment, we don't appear to be in the same place we were at that stage, so I think that's a factor as well. I was looking at their squad earlier. They appear to have a pretty similar
Mm-hmm.
squad to last year, a lot of the same names. They've signed guy that was at Hibs last year, actually, Kuharevich, the
Okay.
striker. So
Yeah.
he's a decent enough player, but equally, I guess it does kind of show the levels. Maybe that Kuharevich, who was kind of good for Hibs, but that's the kind of player that they have. So we're effectively playing a Hibs who are a wee bit better. Maybe that's terrible. I shouldn't be doing that. But anyway, you bring up the stuff for last year.
Yeah, so I've just got the starting lineups because it's just interesting to see how Celtic lined up as well. So this is how we lined up for the 5-1 game last year. Of course, Celtic dominated the match and were excellent on the night, really excellent. There was a couple of hairy moments early on in Bratislava's favour, but Celtic weathered that wee bit and really roared into the game. But you'll note there, obviously, Celtic had Kyogo in the team, Celtic had Nicholas Kuhn in the team. And that, again, just to bring back to what we were talking about earlier, that's a huge factor for me. Like, those are huge things for me when we're considering playing Slovan Bratislava at this level. To lose two of your prominent attackers in that match, who, I mean, Nicholas Kuhn was very influential in that match. Now, this image shows it's like a pass map, but it's about on-ball value. So the redder the circle is, Nicholas Kuhn, obviously in the top right of the Celtic team on the left-hand side. He actually had the highest on-ball value in the game.
What's on-ball value, John?
So it's a measurement by StatsBomb of a player's overall worth to a performance, not just in terms of assists or goals or key passes, but their entire endeavour in the match, really, and how impactful they were towards the positive performance of the match. So Callum McGregor, as you can see in the middle there, his is a bigger circle because he had more volume of match actions and passes, etc. But as you can see, Callum McGregor instrumental in that match, and Nicholas Kuhn in that deep red, a very, very high on-ball value. And again, just to bring back what we were talking about Yang earlier, if you look at kind of Kuhn's impact on that right flank in that match, this is passes and carries, so carrying the ball at his feet and passes. But again, just very influential on that right side and getting into that box on that right hand side, which is something Yang wasn't able to do at the weekend, and something that Celtic will need to do in that match. Kuhn obviously sets up the second goal just after half time for Kyogo, which really breaks open the match for Celtic. And a very influential assist, a very explosive assist that I just don't think Celtic have in the team right now. So when we're talking about facing Slovan Bratislava in that 5-1 game and everything, taking everything into account, it's a worry for me that we're a bit weaker in these areas when we've got such a tough test right on the horizon.
Just if anyone's wondering, deadline for us registering our squad is next Thursday. However, we also have the opportunity to bring in two new players up until it will be the Tuesday night. So yeah, Tuesday the 19th at 11 p.m. Celtic Park time if the game's on the following evening. So we've got up until the night before the game to bring in and register two players. But yeah, I think first leg at home is the big takeaway. I kind of feel better about that. I think I know there's always an argument, second leg at home if it goes to extra time, etc. But I like the idea of us hopefully getting a few goal head start. I think that's possible against either team. Obviously, I mean, we battered Slovan last year. Kairat, I think at home you'll be looking to beat them by a few, and then hopefully we go away and show this new defensive resolve that we've found. That's the point I would make from the weekend. As much as I don't think we were great, I think the defence looks solid enough, and even better if we get JSP in next to CCV.
And I don't think people should forget, there's obviously question marks around Liam Scales, etc. But he was very good in that game against Slovan Bratislava last year. He was one of Celtic's best players in the match. Obviously scores the opening goal as well. So, and I've not got great worries about the defence at the moment. I agree with that. And I think playing at home, you've got to show initiative and put yourself on the front foot and be aggressive. And Celtic can do that under Brendan Rodgers in Europe, because we saw it on multiple occasions last year. I'm feeling fairly confident about getting through the tie. It just spooked me a little bit when you're looking at last year's team in that match and you're thinking, well, we don't have Kyogo, we don't have Kuhn, so where are we getting this creativity, this spark from that we really need at that level? It's so important at that level that you have that individual spark. And when I'm looking across that front line at the moment, you've got Daizen Maeda. He's an agent of chaos, and he can disrupt things, but he's not a creative winger, is he? And that creativity is a problem for me.
So you're wanting Slovan? Are you fine to publicly say
I think
that?
so. Just because they're a more known quantity, and Celtic obviously know how to beat them. And again, important as well, James Forrest came into that game and had a good role to play. And if we're being fair, Adam Idah also scores in the game late on. Obviously, Celtic had really wrapped up the game, and it's Forrest who feeds that lovely through ball to Adam Idah. So again, it just reiterates that they do feel like impact players at that point in the game. I think I'd be happy with Slovan simply because I don't like those long European trips for the players, and it just feels a little bit more unknown and dangerous to me. I don't know how a lot of people will feel about it, but I feel like the known quantity of Slovan and last year it can be a good thing, a strength for Celtic in the tie.
I'd rather K-Rat, I think, just based off that. I don't think they're as strong a team as Slovan. But then again, I guess if it is K-Rat we play, then they'll have proven that they're a stronger team than Slovan. So it's an interesting one. But definitely going to catch those two legs and hopefully find out a bit about both teams.
I mean, it's worth noting, I think Slovan were the highest ranked unseeded side in the draw.
Yes.
Is that correct?
So it's the toughest draw that we've got. We can lean in that when we exit the competition. But no, that would be good. I think that's basically us. Got a couple of other wee kind of minor things. I enjoyed the opening week of the Scottish Premiership. I watched a few games. I watched Motherwell Rangers at the weekend, and I thought Motherwell were really, really good. They're obviously a lot made of Rangers, but I really enjoyed the way Motherwell are clearly going to play a passing game under their new manager, which I think is really refreshing for the league. And you want to see that. Don't you want to see Motherwell coming to Celtic Park and maybe playing some sort of expansive football? It's certainly not just hoofing the ball long. And I thought, as much as Hearts Aberdeen wasn't a great game, I thought Hearts looked decent enough and looked like they've made a few good signings. And Hibs won their opening game, and Rangers are going to be there and Aberdeen are going to be there. St Mirren were good against us. It's always, I think, easy at the start of the season to get swept up in the optimism, and then by week 2 or 3 you fall away. And I'm very wary of that, though. I'm not falling into that trap, but I do actually believe that the league might be a little bit strong. There's a few new faces in the league this year that I think want to do the right thing.
Yeah, I was just totting up there. I think I've seen 4 Scottish Premiership matches this weekend, because I watched Falkirk Dundee United, I saw the Motherwell Rangers game, I obviously saw the Celtic game, and then I watched Hearts Aberdeen. What was amusing for me in the Motherwell game was, and I was very impressed by Motherwell and the way they set up their game and the way they passed through Rangers. It was amusing though, because they kind of played in the way that people have been talking about, the way Russell Martin's team are going to be playing all summer, and they just did it more effectively, especially in that second half. They were very, very impressive. And the Falkirk Dundee United game was very entertaining. I like the historic clubs in the league with strong support bases, and Falkirk are certainly that. Obviously a team on the up, a lot of hype and energy around them, and I like that. And the atmosphere was fantastic in that match. The turnout was fantastic, and it was just a fun match to watch. The Hearts Aberdeen was less of a spectacle, shall we say. A lot of intrigue around Hearts this year. The Tony Bloom, Derek McInnes, all that. And I just thought there was a lack of quality in the game. I thought Aberdeen were quite poor, and they need to sharpen up, I think, because I think there's expectation on their shoulders. They've just won their first Scottish Cup in decades, and I think some of the stuff they played in the early parts of last season was obviously thrilling, and I think they need to get back to that, because I just thought they were pretty bereft of ideas at Tynecastle, and and Hearts did a job on them pretty professionally and comfortably in the end.
Yeah, so that's the opening week. We'll see how it goes over the course of the season. Remember, Celtic's next game Sunday lunchtime away to Aberdeen at Pittodrie. So pretty big one, that one. Thanks so much for watching. We want you all to get involved in the show as well, John, don't we? We want them to send in various things. I think we want to kind of establish a regular mail-in section as well. That's risky business, knowing the people that watch
comments
this.
Are great. Comments are great, and now, like, I do the live show every day, and live comments are harder to bring in and react to or answer when you're live in the moment on the streams. Like, it can be difficult to do that just from my perspective. But if you send in comments below, questions, ideas, segment ideas, if you want us to explore or talk about a certain topic, would be interested in that. And again, when you leave the comments below and not live, it just gives us more of a chance to dig into whatever you want to ask. And I mean, I think we want the tail end of the show to be a bit of a viewers and listeners section. We used to do a bit of that on the Grand Old podcast, and it works well and it's fun. So if you've got any questions about Celtic, questions about us or the channels or anything that we do, feel free to send something in and we'll have a wee look at it.
How can people support the show? Just by coming back next week, ideally.
Coming back next week,
telling people
that we're out and about. We used to get the audience for the podcast was fairly healthy, and obviously the audience for 6-7 is healthy. The audience for Celtic Games healthy, and Celtic Way as well has got its own audience. But just let people know that we're doing this on a weekly basis. This is the only place that myself and Hamish will be together. And as I say, we want to establish it as something people want to listen to on a weekly basis for measured and hopefully informative Celtic chat. That's basically my pitch. So tell people, subscribe to the channel, leave comments, let us know what you think, give us your feedback, positive or negative, and we'll take it all on board.
Okay, everyone, appreciate you watching, and as John says, we'll be back next week.